Okay, so we are in week 3, and we are going over TEAC 8.5i. Basically says to write an equation in the form of y equals mx plus b, which is our slope-intercept form, to model a linear relationship between two quantities using verbal, numerical, tabular, and graphical representation. Now, none of this is new. Our verbal description, you've seen these many times, and this is the way you'll see it most often than not in your star. You also have equation, table of values, and your graph. Now these two you can get this information from here, put it onto a graph, vice versa. Okay, so these are just the examples of the way you're going to be writing equations. So remember that our slope intercept form is y equals mx plus b. And as we went over in week 2, we should know now how to identify our slope, which is the m, which is what's attached to your variable, and your y-intercept, which is away from the variable and tells us where the line crosses the y-axis, or where we initially start from. So again, slope, or m, shall I say, stands for slope. And then, of course, your b stands for y-intercept. Okay. How do you find slope of a line in an equation? Well, there's different ways you can write this, but essentially, how you find slope on a line of an equation is you need to identify your m, identifying your m. Okay, so once you find your m, that's going to equal your slope. Of course, you can write this out in a complete sentence. Because of this tool and it being a little difficult, I'm not going to write it all out. And then how do we find the y? Well, the y, of course, like I said, you have to identify your b. So again, your b is your y-intercept. Now remember that this is from an equation. We already have it in this format here. Okay, so in this case, our slope is 2, and our y-intercept is 3. Okay, now if they ask for it in an ordered pair, remember it's always 0, comma, the y-intercept. Okay, because x is always going to be 0. Okay, all right, so that's just a quick little overview. That's the easier part, identifying it from an equation, which we have done. Now, how do I write an equation from a graph? So if I have it on a line on a graph, okay, I got to identify the two things. Remember, I need to identify my m, and I need to identify my b. Now, the easiest thing to do is to identify your b first, okay? Because remember, what is b? B is where the line crosses the y-axis. And in this case, it crosses it at -3. So -3. Now, the m is going to be my slope. But to find my slope, I'm going to have to do my rise over my run. So I do have to find 2 perfect points. And again, we're piggybacking off of what week 2. So we should already know this. So in this case, they did use this point right here and they use this point right here. And again, it doesn't matter which 2 points as long as they're perfect points, okay? As long as they intersect exactly. And then I'm going to count my rise. 1, 2, 3. So my rise is 3, and my run is 1. Now, I want to double check my scale. Okay, good. It's going by 1. Okay, but remember, we always want to check that. And then the other thing, like I told y'all last week, is you need to ask yourself, is this line going upward or is it going downward? Right, it's going upward. So is that a positive or is that a negative slope? Positive slope. Again, we want to make sure that we recognize that and we ask ourselves that, because that can throw off our slope. Because remember, a positive 3 and a negative 3 slope are two different equations, two different slopes. So in this case, my rise is 3 and my run is 1. And if I put this into my calculator, or I already know what 3 over 1, it equals to 3. So in this case, my slope is positive 3. My y-intercept is negative 3. But now I got to put this information into an equation. So I have to write it in this format right here, y equals mx plus b. Well, you're just going to plug it in. Y equals, my m is 3, my variable x, and my y-intercept is negative 3, so I'm going to put minus 3. And this is how I write my equation from a graph. Okay? So, and again, all these steps are here. If you read, I'm just reiterating what it's telling us. Okay, let's go ahead and move down to from a table. Now, if I'm dealing with a table, well, I first want to look at my table, because if you can find where x is 0, then you know that whatever y is, that is my y-intercept. Because remember, my b is going to be 0, comma b, or my y-intercept. So if I'm looking at a table, I want to try to identify if I can find where my y-intercept is. And it's always going to be where x is 0. So in this case, luckily, they do have it. Okay, now it's not always going to be the case, but in this case, they do. So that makes it easier. So now we know that it's 11. So our b is 11. Okay, now to find the m, from a table, there's a couple of things that we can do. We can do the change in y over the change in x. Okay, so in other words, from here to here, what was the change? Well, it was plus 1. From here, from 1 to 2, it was plus 1. From 2 to 3, it was plus 1. Okay, and then I have to figure out the change in the y. Well, the y from here, 11 to 14, it's plus 3. From 14 to 17, it's plus 3. And so, and also plus 3. So my change in y, so this is, I'm looking at my y first. My change in y was 3. And then the change in my x was 1. So 3 over 1. And 3 over 1 is 3. So that's how I can do it from a table. Now, because we have our calculators, which hopefully you have access, yes, you can go into your stat edit and you can input your x and your y and then do your calc and then your linear regression. Just remember that sometimes we get confused when we're seeing the tables horizontally. So we need to remember that the x is going to be your L1 and your y is going to be your L2. If you mix those up, your answer is going to be wrong. Now, if you do input this into stat edit, then it's going to give you your entire equation. It'll give you your entire y equals mx plus b. But in case you don't have a calculator or you don't have a graphing calculator to do stat edit, then you're going to have to do change in y over change in x. Okay. So now that we've done that, I can go ahead and input this info into my equation. So y equals m, it's 3, x my variable, and my b is 11, so it's positive 11. And there's my equation. So now I found my wrote an equation from a graph and then now from a table. Okay, so awesome. Moving on. Those are some examples. Okay, let's look at this one right here. This is writing it from in written form. Okay, so these are the ones that scare us the most. I know. Okay, because 1, we have to read. 2, we have to identify the keywords, and then we got to look at it. So we're going to have to read this through a couple of times. So my best advice to you would say, first, get through reading it. Okay, make sure you can read it fluently. So the number of nickels in a coin collection is 6 less than 4 times the number of dimes. If X represents the number of dimes, which equation represents the relationship between the number of nickels and the number of dimes in the collection? Okay, we got to the first time. Now let's go back, reread it, but let's do it one sentence at a time, and then try to identify keywords. And these keywords are keywords that we're going to piggyback to from week 1. So we need to remember that week 1, and if you don't, you have that with you. You can always go back and look at your vocabulary words. So the number of nickels in a coin collection is 6 less than. That's a keyword. Now, less than means to what? Right. It means to subtract. However, when we look at less than and more than, we need to remember that not only does it mean to add or subtract, in this case, less than subtract, it also means that we got to switch the info. What do I mean by switch? I mean what's on the right side is going to go on the left side, and what's on the left side is going to go on the right side. So let's write that first piece out. So it's a 6 less than 4 times. So my 4 times a number. Okay. Now remember, anytime we hear or see or read the word a number, remember that that's my variable. So this one is 4 times. Right. So it's 4x. And then this is 6. So, but remember, I'm going to switch. So I'm going to throw the 4x to the front and then minus, because less than means to minus, and I'm putting the 6 on the right side. So 6 less than 4 times a number. So that's what I just wrote out, 4x minus 6. So if x represents the number of dimes, so that's x, and which equation represents the relationship between the number of nickels and dimes? So they want to know between the relationship between nickels and dimes. So this is what I have. Here's my linear equation. So I'm going to write that out right here. Y equals 4x minus 6. And of course, if I look at going back to my slope intercept form, my m is going to be, right, 4, because it's what's attached to my variable. And my b is going to be 6 because it's what's away from the variable. Okay, and that's my y-intercept. So when we're doing this from a word problem, read it at least once, maybe even twice. Okay, then go back and just read it piece by piece and circle your keywords. Once you circle your keywords right on top, what does that mean? Minus, add, divide, multiply. Okay, and then read it again, and then now start writing it out over the words. Once you do that, then you can come back over here and write it out as it should be. And from there, you'll be able to identify your slope and your y-intercept. Okay, I know these are a little bit more tricky, but do your best. Take it one step at a time. Don't try to just read it once and figure it out. You're going to be overwhelmed. Okay. And let's go back to here. Now, this is the easiest type right here. And this is identifying it from a equation. So we kind of did this from the beginning, but I just want to go over one last time. So this is my slope intercept form. Now, what do we notice? We notice that our x, or our variable, is at the end and not at the beginning. It doesn't matter. What I need to remember. I need to remember that my m is gonna be attached to the x. Okay, so it's gonna be question mark x or any other variable. It doesn't have to be x, but it's attached to my variable. And then my b is gonna be on its own, away from the variable. So if I look at this right here, where it is attached to the variable, right? My 3. Now, it's not just any 3, it's minus 3. So that means that this is a negative slope. So my m is negative 3. Because you cannot just leave the minus there alone. Okay. And then what's away from the variable? My 8. And so that is my b. Now, if I wanted to rewrite this in slope intercept form, I would simply just write y equals negative 3x plus 8. And that's it. So I hope this helps. Again, take it one step at a time. Your tougher ones are probably going to be the written form, but you'll be fine. Just follow those steps, one step at a time. Find those keywords. You're going to be just fine. All right. Thank you guys. And continue to do what you're doing. I know that, we probably miss school by now, but I know I do, and I'm sure your parents do too. But we're in this together. We're learning together. And again, if you have any questions after this video, you can reach me through Google Classroom. Your parents can call me, text me, email me. So we're here to help each other. Okay, we're not here to put all this so much work on you. You do your part. We're gonna do our part. We're gonna be fine.